Hey everyone, I'm Abby Sharp. Welcome to Abby's Kitchen. Since we've now gone through the 10 principles of intuitive eating, a lot of you have been asking me how you can instill some of these skills into your family. Specifically, how can you get your picky kids to eat well without forcing them into restrictive or obsessive food behaviors like you may have grown up with? So today, I'm going to be sharing all of the secrets to help raise a competent, intuitive eater. Now, before we start, my quick disclaimer, the information in this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only, so you should always speak to a healthcare provider about your unique healthcare needs. Also, the technique I am sharing here is not meant to shame parents who have a different approach. If what you're doing is working for you, amazing. I just want to share the gold standard for infant feeding and dealing with picky eating. And of course, a big reminder to subscribe to this channel and ring that little bell so that you never miss a video. Okay, folks, real talk. Most of us were probably raised in what we call the clean plate club, and therefore we're taught that we couldn't leave the table or have dessert until we ate our broccoli and peas. Maybe our caregiver used the airplane to sneak food into our mouth, or we were bribed with chocolate in order to behave, or we were withheld a fun activity until we choked down a food that we really didn't like. All of these seemingly harmless tricks may have encouraged us to ignore our hunger cues and choke down our natural and normal fear of something new to appease the adult at the table or to get what we really want. Now, if you're a parent, raise your hand if you've ever said or tried one or more of the following to get your kid to eat. If you have your broccoli, then you can have ice cream. Just one more big boy bite and you'll be done. I need you to at least try everything on your plate. Never letting your kid have any kind of sugar, fast food, or other junk food, or hiding vegetables in sauces, smoothies, or muffins without telling them. All of these common feeding strategies may seem like they work in the short run because they get healthy food into the bodies of our children, but they don't encourage children to become competent, intuitive eaters as they grow up. In fact, the concern is that these tricks may actually encourage your kid to distrust you, to distrust their own satiety signals, to distrust the forced upon healthy foods, and to obsess over certain bad or forbidden foods. Basically, it causes the opposite effect in the long run of what we are really trying to accomplish. The reality is that hunger, satiety, and body trust are things that babies are innately experts in. And it's usually not until they start solids and the bribes and tricks and little hacks begin that they forget how to listen to their body. So how do we give them this control back while still encouraging a picky eater to eat? Well, it starts with the division of responsibility. So what is the division of responsibility? Developed by feeding expert Ellen Satter, the division of responsibility is a theory of feeding that acknowledges children's natural self-feeding and food regulation capacities and gives us as parents the responsibility to create a supportive environment where our kids can thrive as competent eaters. The division of responsibility suggests that as parents, our job is to determine what foods are served at meals or snacks, where that meal occurs, and when that meal occurs. Our child is given the autonomy and choice to determine what they eat of the foods that is served and how much they eat or if they eat at all. Now, I know it might sound crazy at first to give your toddler any sort of freedom when it comes to eating. I mean, how can they possibly know what they need to grow and thrive? Well, let me tell you, in this situation, they do, and there's actual evidence to support it. The division of responsibility is also recommended as the gold standard of feeding by a ton of major pediatric societies and health authorities. So this is no joke. The goal of the division of responsibility is to raise a competent eater, which is a related term to the more popular intuitive eater. Now, when given the freedom to eat in response to their own hunger and fullness cues, children are better able to eat the amount of food that they need and grow in a way that is right for them. In other words, they can maintain their body's settling point because there is not that external pressure dictating their consumption. When they're not being pressured, they're more likely to be open to trying new foods. And when foods are not dichotomized as good food and bad food, or what you must eat in order to get what you really want, they all occupy a level playing field. The result is that kids don't obsess over sweets or fear the healthy foods that are being forced upon them. And that's a really good thing. So now let's break down the facts on how you can get your picky toddler to eat with some easy steps and tips. First, model eating competence. I don't think it's reasonable to expect a child to eat something if their role model is not eating it as well. And if we go even further back to when children are starting solids, I also don't think it's reasonable to expect a child can even learn how to eat solids without a model sitting with them doing the same. For older children, research also suggests that eating together as a family is linked to better academic performance, higher self-esteem and resilience, and lower risk of depression, substance abuse, teen pregnancy, eating disorders, and obesity. For these reasons, I strongly suggest always eating as a family at the dinner table. Start with just 2 minutes for those really, really little ones and work your way up to 15 to 20 minutes at the table. What if your kid eats at 5 p.m. and you and your husband prefer to eat at 7? Move the family schedule around to make meals a priority. I cannot stress how important this one step is. So if you get nothing else out of these recommendations, make it be this. If you absolutely can't make schedules work between you and your partner and the kids, then I suggest kind of switching things off with your partner or another caregiver to ensure that at least one person can eat with the children at almost every meal. There will always be instances where you got to go to an event or out for dinner and you have to let the kids eat alone. And in those situations, I suggest at least having a snack with the child, so kind of like a mini meal of all the same components of their meal, and then you can finish your meal out with your partner or wherever you go. Second, eat family style. Children like autonomy, and serving a meal family style is a great way to reduce waste and also give your kiddo the opportunity to choose what they want out of what you have offered. If you pre-plate your child's food, you risk A, overwhelming them with too much on their plate, which often can result in them not eating at all. B, putting unsafe or fear foods on their plate, which may upset them and freak them out of eating anything at all. And C, increase the likelihood of waste. Under the recommendations of the Division of Responsibility, it is imperative that we give our children that control. Third, be respectful, but don't cater. Remember, you decide what you're going to make for dinner and when it's going to be served and where it's going to be served, not your toddler. You do not need to ever cater to a picky eater, but the suggestion is to build a balanced meal that you enjoy making and eating as a family, and to ensure that there is always one safe food or fallback food on the table. So a safe food is something that, assuming your child is hungry, that they will reliably fill their belly with, even if they're not up for trying something new or eating a food that they're just kind of learning to like. So serving a safe food helps our kids trust that they can help satisfy their own hunger in a way that makes them feel safe. For a lot of kids, let's be real, this is usually the carb food, right? So bread, rice, pasta, fruit, maybe it's milk, but you know your kid best. Make sure that there's a lot of this food to go around in case it's all your picky eater eats. Fourth, offer variety. Satter would suggest always making sure that there is some kind of carb, protein, vegetable, and fat. I would agree. I mean, we want to offer a variety of the different food groups and let our kids choose from those offerings. As for the meals themselves, you can of course have your family staples and favorites, but I do recommend switching things up and offering a variety of different carbs, proteins, veggies, and fruit so that your kid gets exposure to a variety of foods and you don't get stuck in a brutal food rut. Number 5, make food taste good. This is so important in this day and age because it feels like a lot of mommy bloggers and wellness influencers are constantly pushing a no salt, no sugar, no fat, no fun lifestyle and extending it onto their kids. Poor kids, right? Do not be afraid to make your kids' food and your food taste good. And that often means adding fat, some salt, and some sugar. These are just tools in the chef's toolbox, so you do not need to feel guilty about smart use of any or all of them. While of course I allow my kid fun foods that are packed with sugar and salt and are easy to like regardless, I do try to focus my use on these add-ins to what I call more challenging foods. So for example, I want my kid to learn to like oatmeal. So I'm going to put a little bit of maple syrup or honey on top. I want my kid to learn to like salmon. So I'm going to add like a soy brown sugar glaze. I might want my kid to like broccoli. So I'll serve it with a cheese sauce on top. Kids' crackers and like sweet berries and things like that are easier for my kid to enjoy as is. So there's no need for me to doctor them up with more sugar or a fatty dip if I don't want to. Use salt, sugar, and fat smartly, and your kids will be much more likely to eat and enjoy these naturally nourishing foods. Number 6, stop pressuring. Remember the division of responsibility rules. You did your part by choosing the foods that would be served. They now have to decide what they're going to eat and how much of it they're going to eat. If they just eat their safe food and try nothing else at that meal, you need to just kind of zip your mouth for now and don't try to get in there to make that meal, more healthy or more balanced. If something is on the table that they don't yet like or are learning to like, you can simply say, you don't have to eat it. No pressure, no games. And over time, they will let their defense down and be more willing to try something new if the mealtime experience is pleasant. And the more times they see it, the more likely they are to touch it. The more they touch it, the more likely they are to put it on their plate. The more they put it onto their plate, the more likely they are to put it into their mouth. And of course, the more often they put it in their mouth, the more likely they are to eat it and enjoy it. This can be a long game. I get that it's frustrating, as it can typically take between 8 to 15 exposures of a food for a child to accept it. But it is absolutely worth the wait. If we pressure, we ruin our chances potentially for life. So keep the learning experience positive and pressure-free. Number 7, do not react. This is a really tricky one, but it's really, really important that we stop making a big deal of mealtime when your kid does or doesn't eat something that we want them to eat or not eat. If we gasp and cheer the moment that our kid puts a carrot in their mouth, they will start to get suspicious that a carrot is something unusual for them to like. They might not do it again. If we make a big fuss over them eating too much of the cookies on the table, they might recognize that cookies are a big deal, and they better eat as many as they possibly can in case mom doesn't serve them again. Keep your cool. If there's no pressure, we also have to ensure that there is no praise. If you absolutely must say something when they eat something that you're proud of, which I get, try something like, I love this family time. Or ask them a neutral question about the food, like, what does the tofu taste like to you? Is it crispy? Is it soft? Just don't make a scene. Number 8, build a schedule and reliable routine and stick to it. If you have a kid who refuses lunch and then 20 minutes later they're begging you for a snack, then they get to the dinner table and push their food away, you likely need a more reliable meal and snack schedule. If we want our kids to try something new or eat something other than their safe food, they need to get to that meal or snack with an appetite. I recommend ensuring that there are at least a few hours between each meal and snack. If your kid is whining right before a meal because they're hungry, you can ask them if they're able to maybe wait 15 or 20 minutes until dinner's ready. If they can't, then now is a good time to sit them down for a little appetizer, something that is kind of part of the meal but already ready. So cut up veggies and dip is always a really easy option. And that brings me to number 9, thou shalt not lie or hide vegetables. There are so many books and blogs and suggestions on mommy groups about how to trick your kids into eating their vegetables by hiding them in sauces or muffins or smoothies, etc. I am not really a fan of this technique. While I am all for making food more nutritious, so of course that means I add vegetables or nut butters or whole grains to my recipes whenever I possibly can. If a child is old enough to ask what is in something, it is very important that you are transparent and you tell them. Children are incredibly smart when it comes to picking out food that they don't like. And by lying to them about the fact that there's spinach in their smoothie, it communicates to them that spinach is something that is so bad, it needs to be hidden. It needs to be lied about. It also makes our children distrust us when it comes to food. And the division of responsibility is all about fostering trust. If a young child asks, Tell them what is in their food and why. You can say that spinach gives it a lovely green color, or the yogurt makes it nice and creamy and thick. You don't have to get into the fact that it adds iron or vitamin C or whatever. I mean, communicate in language that your kids will understand, but communicate honestly. Number 10, get them involved. Kids love control, and a lot of picky eating is about control, especially in those early toddler years. When kids are given some autonomy to help out in some way, they're way more likely to want to try. So again, we don't want to become short order cooks here, but we could theoretically give a child a choice between 2 vegetables for dinner. Do you want the broccoli or the carrots? Which one sounds good to you tonight? We could also take them grocery shopping and allow them to choose 1 new fruit to try that week. Also, there's a lot of tasks that you can get them involved in when it comes to meal prep in the kitchen. So things like washing produce, adding ingredients, stirring things together, etc. You are still creating the boundaries here, but you're giving them a little bit of autonomy to safely work within them. Number 11, say goodbye to dichotomous language and get descriptive. We don't really have any food rules in my house, but we don't use the word TREAT. Why? What is so bad about that? Well, just like words like junk food versus healthy food, children are really quick to associate foods like treat and junk with things that they're not supposed to have and that are limited but highly valuable. Meanwhile, they see foods that are called healthy as the ones that mom and dad really, really want them to eat. If my son asks for a treat, I just don't repeat the word back. I simply call it whatever it is. So it's cake, it's a cookie, it's ice cream, etc. Yes, of course, foods are not all created nutritionally equal, but we can make them morally equal by neutralizing our language. A lot of parents also find themselves describing a sweet food or junk food as yucky to try to discourage their kid from eating it, and yummy when they're trying to push like a green bean on a kid. Kids quickly figure out this little game, and again, they learn to distrust us. So instead, describe foods in neutral but descriptive language. Talk about broccoli looking like a tree and asparagus being snappy, or a strawberry being nice and juicy. Talk about the cupcake as colorful and ice cream as creamy and cold and the cookie as chewy. Just don't call it good or bad. Number 12, do sit-down snacks. So snacks have become basically synonymous with treats or easy foods in toddler speak, but really we need to start thinking of snacks as mini meals that offer as much balance and nutrition as a whole meal. I recommend sitting down as a snack just like you would a meal, and including at least 2 or 3 different foods but in a smaller serving. So ideally you're looking to get 2 or more of what I call hunger-crushing foods. So sources of fiber-rich carbs, healthy fats, and protein. This may also be your time to offer a food that maybe your child hasn't eaten a whole lot of that day. So if your kid ate a lot of fruit at breakfast, maybe offer some crackers and cheese for snack. If they had a lot of meat at lunch, have veggies or fruit at snack. Whatever you choose, just do it sitting down. So number 13 is make bedtime snacks filling, not thrilling. There will be days when your kiddo just decides that they do not want to eat anything at mealtime. If this happens at breakfast or lunch and then they ask for a snack immediately after they get down from the table, you can remind them that you just had a meal, but snack will be happening soon. If this happens at dinner time, I know a lot of us parents will be worried about sending our kid to bed with no food at all. I know I was terrified the first time I did it because this mama did not want a 2 a.m. wake up. But in this case, you can do a bedtime snack. But as Satter says, make it filling, not thrilling. So rather than an exciting fun food that your kid might learn to kind of hold out for every single night, like cookies or a popsicle, you can do a mini version of the meal that they missed, including, of course, a lot of their safe food, or something really simple but not super exciting. So milk or peanut butter on bread, or pita bread and guacamole, or yogurt parfait, veggies and dip, etc. Filling, not thrilling. Number 14, serve dessert with the meal. All right, now let's talk about something that you're probably really wondering about, and that's sweets. How do you get your child to stop obsessing over dessert? Well, there's 2 ways to do this. The first is to put dessert on the same playing field as the rest of the meal, and that means serving it with their meal. But unlike the rest of the family-style meal, which kids should have access to on demand in whatever amounts that they're hungry for, the dessert is a one portion only. That's the rule. They can eat it first, they can eat it last, they can eat it sometime in the middle of their meal, but once their dessert portion is gone, they have to move on to other options on the table. One is that it doesn't teach our kids to eat until they've kind of filled up on their meal, until they're full, only to be served dessert and then eat past fullness in sweets. A competent intuitive eater would ideally eat their meal until satiety and be too full for dessert. And I've seen this happen with my son, so I do know that it is possible. The other is that we don't want them to be putting dessert up on a pedestal, and that they must kind of drag themselves through all the yucky food before they get the gold. This gives dessert far too much power. Now, this approach does not work for all children at all stages in life. I found it worked great with my son up until maybe 18 months, and then the toddler years brought on the tantrums. Some parents in this stage between like 2 or 3 find that they can't really explain to their toddler why there's only one portion. So they eat dessert and then they basically cry for the rest of the mealtime. Let's be honest, it is pretty hard for anyone to feel hunger or fullness cues when you're hysterically crying. So if you're struggling with mealtime tantrums, maybe try picking this technique up later on when your child is old enough to understand the one portion rule and that they can have unlimited amounts of everything else. Number 15, offer unlimited sweets as a snack. This is the alternative method for dealing with sweets, and the one that I've been trying to use now that I'm in the throes of the terrible twos. So once a week or so, offer dessert at a snack in an unlimited amount. This could mean like putting out a plate of cookies or letting your kids eat as much of their Halloween candy as they want. Side note, I did a whole other video on Halloween candy and sugar right here. But the key here is that this unlimited sweet sesh is far enough away from a meal that it doesn't compete with nutritious foods. But it gives the child the message that these foods are really no big deal and there's no need to hoard or obsess over them when they're clearly allowed to eat as much as they want. A child that is allowed fun foods throughout the week will be less likely to obsess over sweets and eat a reasonable amount when they're available. This is a really important skill that we hope that our kids can carry on throughout life. Number 16, balance fun foods with nutrition. If you're giving dessert or a snack that is maybe less nutritious more often, you can balance out that fun food with something more nourishing. So for example, serving milk with cookies, or yogurt with pie, or cheese with crackers, etc. This will encourage your child to put the fun food and the nutritious food on the same level playing field, and also will give you the satisfaction of ensuring that there is at least some nutrition going in throughout the day. And finally, trust your child to grow into their healthiest, happiest weight. Now this is a big topic, admittedly, so I'm just going to keep it top level, but it's very important to trust this process as it pertains to your child and their weight. Don't be freaked out if your child eats a lot less or a lot more than other children in his cohort. Children do not need to be put on diets, restricted, or be force-fed. If you're not employing pressure and bribes and tricks, a healthy child will eat the right amount of food for their body. You need to just trust that. Often, a very small child will make a parent nervous, so parents start interfering with eating, which really only perpetuates their disinterest in food. And often a very large child will make parents very nervous, so they restrict, and the child eats as much as they possibly can when they get the chance. If you're not doing these things and your child is still not eating or growing well, then it's really important to speak to your pediatrician about other possible feeding issues, including oral motor development, tongue ties, behavioral concerns, and developmental delays. Okay, so now I want to cover some commonly asked questions about dealing with picky eaters. 1, what happens if he only eats the safe food? If you've been pressuring your kid to eat healthy foods or restricting fun foods in the past, it's very likely that your kid is going to only eat their safe food or only eat dessert first. It's natural for a child to see the forbidden food be served and try to get as much as they possibly can before you go back to your old pressuring ways. Give it time. Your child will need to learn how to trust that you're not going to cut them off and you're not going to force them to try something that they're not yet comfortable with. Remember, keep your cool. Keep putting the vegetables or whatever food it is that they're learning to like on the table, but not expecting or insisting that they eat it. Keep being neutral when they pick it up, put it on their plate, or put it in their mouth. Keep trying to make the food taste good with a little bit of salt or sugar or fat, whatever. And of course, expose, expose, expose. Now, next question, what if I run out of the safe food? So ideally, we want to try to ensure that there's enough of that safe food to go around. But of course, our fridges and pantries are not magically replenishing, so I often sometimes run out of fruit because my family eats so much of it. So if a safe food is in limited quantity, you may want to offer 2 safe foods on the table. So this, for example, could be maybe fruit and cheese. What if he eats nothing at all? Do not panic, it happens. See my tips on offering a filling, not thrilling bedtime snack. And for younger toddlers, this might be the time for their milk. Keep in mind that hunger is actually naturally suppressed by melatonin. So in my experience, even the nights that my kid eats nothing at all, he drinks his milk, sleeps through the night, wakes up at a normal time, and just has a bigger breakfast. You will be surprised how amazingly resilient they are. What if dessert is his safe food and he just wants more of it? If you choose to serve dessert with the meal, keep in mind that this should not be the safe food, since we really need to stick to that 1 dessert serving rule. So that way it doesn't crowd out other nutritious foods. Shouldn't we teach our kids that sugar is bad for them? Children are born with a neutral attitude towards food. If we start saying things like sugar is poison or candy is bad for you, kids will start thinking that all foods that are bad actually taste really good, and they develop a skewed relationship with food. Keep language neutral and just call a food what it is. It's not a treat, it's not bad, it's a cookie, it's a lollipop, it's a cake. Next, how much should my child eat? So a lot of people will give you these specifics about how many tablespoons of food per month or year of life a child should eat, but how much your child needs is so highly variable between children and within children between days that I find that these guidelines just stress parents out more and force them into restriction or pressuring behaviors. I prefer to serve food family style so that kids can therefore choose what they want to put on their plate and you can limit the waste. If you're pre-portioning your child's meal, give them just 1 or 2 pieces of each thing and let them ask or motion for more. What if my child is overweight or underweight? According to the division of responsibility, it doesn't matter what the current size of your child is, the recommendations here are the same. Do not pressure the child to eat or restrict foods, and their weight will fall where it's supposed to. And yes, even overweight children should have access to fun foods and desserts without it being used as a bribe. Restriction and pressure often will do the opposite of what you intend and will only make a small child eat less and a large child eat more than what their body actually needs. Now, what about the no thank you bite or 1 polite bite? I get why parents use this, but it's actually against the tenets of the division of responsibility. It teaches children that they are not allowed to trust their body when it says no because they have to do something for an adult. We want to teach our kids to be able to trust their inner gauge when it tells them that something isn't right. And this extends far beyond food to other important areas of life, like strangers, for example. So instead of the 1 bite rule, you can teach your kids that you respect them to listen and trust their body. You can teach them, if they do not want to eat something, to say, no, thank you, I'm still learning to like beans, for example. If they don't like anything that I've offered, should I make them a separate meal? If you have offered a safe food and they still are not interested in eating, consider that they may genuinely just not be very hungry, and you can try again at snack time. You really don't want to cater to each child by making separate meals when they don't eat or don't like what's being originally served, or they may just learn that they can hold out on dinner to get the mac and cheese or the pizza or the chicken nuggets that they really like. Stay strong and just trust that if you did your part by offering the safe food, that you need to just let them do theirs. What if my kid sees a favorite food on the table while they're having lunch and starts screaming that they just want the banana? So I put this question in there because this is what my kid sometimes does all the time, so I figure I'm not alone. Remember, you are the adult, you decide what foods are being served, and if you didn't choose the banana as the safe food or as an option at that particular meal, you don't have to give in. I don't. You can simply say, we can have the banana for a snack this afternoon or tomorrow, but right now we're having cherries, and you've still got lots of different foods on the table to choose from. Whatever it is that they're crying about, just make sure that you do put it into the rotation often enough that it doesn't become a novelty. So for example, my son knows that there are rainbow sprinkles in the cupboard, and sometimes he will ask for sprinkles on his food. I know he likes sprinkles, so a few times a week I will preemptively kind of add them to his meal. You want to be preemptive about these things so that you don't get into the habit of them having to throw a tantrum to get foods that they like, then you give in, and then they learn that screaming at the table is how you get what you really want. Are there any non-pressure tips to get my toddler to try or eat new foods? Honestly, there are a lot of fun ways to encourage kids to try new foods without having to resort to food rules and pressure. Some examples that I love are using new fun utensils, cutting food into fun shapes with cookie cutters, serving food in a fun bento box or a colorful container that they like, talking about the food on the table without pressure, like show me which food is green, show me which food is blue. And honestly, just keep putting the food on the table and modeling good eating behavior. I want to remind you that none of this is meant to shame a parent for how they feed their child. If what you are doing is working for you, amazing. Keep it up, moms and dads. But I want to share this evidence-based approach with you for raising a healthy, competent, intuitive eater, since so many of you struggling with picky eating have asked, and this really is the gold standard on how to approach feeding. If you want to print this out, I have a Picky Eaters cheat sheet that you can download when you subscribe to my blog, so I'm going to leave a link to that below. And on that note, if you liked this video, be sure to give it the thumbs up. Leave me a comment below if you have any questions as it pertains to intuitive eating or child nutrition or child feeding, picky eating, etc. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye.